congregation of Cleveland. I'm Pete Clapham, your worship associate for this morning, and it's my great pleasure to welcome those who are checking us out to see if we meet your spiritual needs, as well as visitors, guests, our marvelous musicians, and those of you who are located in the voids of cyberspace. We're here in this place, but this place was here long before we were. We're gathering here today on the lands of many tribes, including the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg peoples, also known as the Three Fires Council, which comprises the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Ottawa. May we regard this land as faithfully as they did. Our faith is based in values, especially love. And love can mean many things, but it always means a linkage of each of us to those with whom we seek a relationship. The strongest linkage is through a covenant that binds each of us. And we express the core of this covenant, as we light our chalice. Essential to our covenant is that we recognize and honor everyone here as you are. That is, as individual human beings. We all have characteristics that some people have used to divide rather than to unify. These include things like race and ethnicity, gender identification and sexuality, religious backgrounds, and these days especially political views. In these polarized times, it's easy to forget that a covenant holds the glue that makes relationship possible. We might say we don't care about these factors, but we do care, because they're important parts of everybody's individual self-identification. And if these things are important to you, it's important that those who seek a relationship respect them and recognize that the things that make each of us who we are, it makes possible perspectives that go far beyond what we can find in any other way. So as long as you're willing to accept others as they are and to have others accept you as you are, you belong here. So welcome, everyone, to our sacred space. And as we begin our service and light our chalice, I would like to make as a member of the choir, I couldn't listen to the music without thinking about what makes music possible. Musicians come as individuals because they want to. And they realize that a single violin or a harpsichord or a cello can't perform Handel or Corelli or Bach. It's coming together and trusting each other and working together to make the music happen that makes it happen. So with that in mind, let us share our covenant on the yellow pew card. We cultivate trust with one another by celebrating differences, honoring boundaries, and offering compassion and care. We listen to each other deeply with curiosity and wonder. We speak for ourselves without need to defend ourselves or persuade each other. We create safe and brave space for healthy conflict, creativity, and fun. We reconcile through forgiving and making amends when we hurt one another.
Good morning. We didn't get a sound check today, so it's always an exciting thing when I speak good morning into the microphone for the first time. I'm Reverend Randy Partain. My pronouns are they, them, and I am delighted to be with you in worship today, whether you're here in person or joining us online. I invite you to just take a moment. We live in a time where there is a great deal of upheaval in the world, in our country, sometimes even in our homes. And so I invite you just for a moment into a little bit of a micro practice as we begin worship today, to just recognize, are you safe in your space right now in this moment? How do you know that you are safe? And is there something you can do to strengthen your felt sense of safety? I'll ask those questions one more time and then we'll take a couple of breaths. Are you safe in your space? How do you know that you are safe? And is there something you can do to strengthen your felt sense of safety? Let's take a couple of breaths. We are constantly invited to co-create safe and brave space with one another. And as we enter into this sacred time, may we be aware of what we can do to renew our own felt sense of safety and to invite a felt sense of safety in those around us. We are going to sing breaths from the Teal hymnal. It's 1001. Did I remember that right? But before we sing 1001 from the Teal hymnal, I invite you to take a moment and greet one another. If you see a face you don't recognize, please make a special effort to help that person feel welcome today. We are thinking about our ancestors today in a few different ways. Some would say the past is always present. Some would say we carry our ancestors with us. Sometimes, whether we like it or not, those who have died are with us in every moment. And we carry a lot of other joys and concerns with us, and so we want to take time in our service to acknowledge that. If you're joining us online today, I invite you to put any joys or concerns that you'd like to share with the congregation in the comments down below the video. If you're here in person, we have our Joys and Concerns book here that people are welcome to write in before the service. We want to acknowledge that Cliff Perkins died suddenly on Tuesday evening at the age of 64. Cliff was the uncle of Daniel Mason's wife and a very good friend to several people at the congregation. So a stone of grief for Cliff and care for those who care for him. We also place a stone to acknowledge that on October 31st, 2016, we lost Brad Larson. It's been 7 years and we miss him more than ever. Care and concern for Brad's family and those who love him. A stone of care and hopefully gratitude. Susan Dubois is recovering in the hospital, patiently waiting to be transferred to rehab, hopefully tomorrow. So care and concern for Susan and a stone of continued patience as she waits to get transferred to rehab. Prayers also for Lisa Van Cleef and family as they grieve the loss of Lisa's mother a week ago Friday. A stone of gratitude for our fantastic music this morning. Thank you for being here with us today and sharing your music with us. And as I place a stone of gratitude, I'm remembering that I meant to do something first before I came up here, so indulge me for a moment. There are some people in the congregation that do a great service, and it kind of is behind the scenes, serving on the Committee for Shared Ministry, and a couple of people are rolling off of that, and I did not have a chance to thank them in person because we met by Zoom, and so thank you for your service to the Committee on Shared Ministry, Laurie. And where is Mike Miller? Mike, I'm going to come around to you. Thank you, Mike. I made the wonderful mistake of giving Jackie Stimpert a box of chocolates when she rolled off of the committee, and so now everybody gets chocolates when they roll off. But Lori and Mike, along with Meg Pauken, are going to be on our newly formed Tending Covenant team, and so it really isn't appropriate for them to be doing all of the heavy lifting. So we've invited a couple of new people onto the Committee on Shared Ministry so that they can step into this new role and have the freedom to do what they need to do there. So thank you both. And now, if there are other things that you are carrying with you, whether it is things from your ancestors or things from this morning or anything in between, I invite you to come forward and place a stone in the water to acknowledge any joys or concerns you'd like to share. How did you do that so perfectly? We place a stone to acknowledge those joys and concerns shared online today. And a final stone for all of those things that we're holding in our hearts for the moment until they find a way to be expressed.
Well, good morning. I was just joking with Reverend Randy before. I could really throw some stinkers out at you today, and I could hide behind the harpsichord so none of the tomatoes hit me. It's rare I get this kind of a blockade for myself. Have you ever been accused of having selective memory? Has that ever been, speaking of tomatoes, has it ever been hurled at you? I know it's been hurled at me, and it has not been a compliment. It's not a compliment to say you are being selectively, having selective memory. It's supposed to be a bad thing, right? But I think that's kind of unfair because all memory is by definition selective, right? There's no remembering that isn't also forgetting. This is actually a deep and very, very long-standing philosophical idea. To codify what we remember is another way of saying what we're intentionally forgetting. And I think about that a lot because we might not think about it, but we are surrounded all the time by different ways to remember stuff, different ways that we remember things. And I was thinking about this in my own sort of life, thinking about ways that I remember things, be it a Post-it note or a journal. I assume all of us spend some amount of time saving things in that mysterious and deeply metaphysical idea of the cloud, whatever that is, hovering above our heads. Maybe there's something more special to you. Maybe you have like a souvenir or like an old yearbook or something that is deeply part of how you remember things. And I was thinking about how the format of those things so often accords to what that thing is that we're remembering. And I thought about this when I found, are you ready for this, a like 150 pack in my office closet of these. Anyone have a guess what this is? This is a rewritable CD. Somebody must have bought these thinking, I always need more of those. And now, I don't have anything that could even read this, let alone copy onto it. But I was thinking about different things that we try to remember and the different ways that we try to remember those things. And there's a lot of stuff out there that, like, this would be exactly the format you would want to hold on to. For example, if you had, like, you know, a Windows 98 Excel spreadsheet with lots of very important data, this would be the device that you'd want to have. If, by contrast, you wanted to, like, remember or hold on to like a deeply personal revelation, some moment of clarity for yourself, and this thing was filling your brain and you wanted to just get that out, you wanted to process through your feelings and think through them, you might instead pull up a voice memo and just sort of like verbal explode at your phone for a little bit to see what it's like, and then to be able to have that to go back and remember things. By contrast, I still use Post-it notes every day. I assume all of us do. Sometimes you just gotta jot something down. Sometimes the cloud is more than you need. Sometimes you don't need a rewritable CD. Sometimes you just need to remember an address. Thinking about this and thinking about our own mental Post-it notes, our own mental CD writers, our own mental voice memos. What this brings to me, and maybe this is a little bit of a hot take, so I'm glad I can dive over here if this is controversial to note. If we can't remember everything perfectly, maybe that means it's okay to be generous to ourselves and also to those we are remembering in terms of what we choose to remember and how we choose to remember them. Maybe it isn't the case that the only authentic way to remember somebody is to hold on to every single one of their faults and every possible way that they hurt me. Maybe in myself, I don't have to remember every bad thing I've ever done to try to capture that perfect digital footprint, because that memory is not more true than other ones, other ways of remembering. So for all of us, as we are entering this season full of heritage and remembering, my hope, my prayer for all of us is that we find ways to be generous and joyful when we think about the ways that we hold on to our own memories.
As you know, our collection plate goes to organizations other than, or typically goes to organizations other than UUCC. And this morning, we will be collecting funds for Renovare music. As I looked in the website, it struck me that this is one of the most creative groups that has ever been our collections partner. And who better to talk about it and tell us why we should donate funds to them than somebody who has actually been part of Renovare, our violinist, and you. If you would like to come up and tell what, from the perspective of somebody who has actually been part of Renovare, what it is and why it is.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's just been such an honor and joy to be here and bless you with this music. So I was involved with Renovare for 2 years, back when I was a student, and it was pre-pandemic, 2019, 2020, And it's just such a beautiful organization that uses our gifts of music for serving the community and serving populations that are usually often forgotten. So they have ministry through prison, and they do a lot of concerts and actually teach music programs in the prisons as well. And so they're in Grafton Correctional Institute and Northeast. The name is currently escaping me, but it's a women's prison not too far from downtown. And they also do a lot of work with building hope in the city, and they are also documentary songwriters. And so they co-create songs with people, just normal people who have experienced really great trauma, and they compose and write them into songs and perform them, and they have discussions afterwards. And it's just a beautiful organization. It's run by 2 incredible women, and they're just doing incredible work. So thank you so much for your offering and for your gift. We really appreciate this, and this is just an organization that's close to my heart, and I hope that you can continue to support them in any other ways down the future. So thank you so much again, and thank you for having me.
I would suggest that everybody take a look at the Renovare Music, that's what they're called, the website. And it is remarkable, the venues that they have been in and how they have tried very hard to meet with and bring the idea of music to communities that have not been served well. For those of you who have discovered that you don't have any money in your pocket, or if you're in cyberspace, you can give to our Cash App handle, $UUCC44122, and in the subject line, put either plate or Renovare. Our meditation this morning is by Lori Walk. I'm not sure how she pronounces her name, and I apologize to her if I got it wrong. She's a native of the Bible Belt and raised a Baptist, preaches and teaches progressive Christianity as one of the ministers in Mayflower Congregational United Church of Christ in Oklahoma City. So it's a little different from what you typically hear from a Unitarian, but that's okay. Holy One, on this day of remembrance, we say aloud their names again, the names of those who have died this year. Died. The word is jarring, so jarring that we hardly use the word, substituting euphemisms that are a bit more vague. Sometimes people say lost, when what they mean is dead. We lost so-and-so this year, but people who die are not lost. They're not misplaced. We didn't lose sight of them, nor did they wander off. They died, and it's as final as the word sounds. But that is, of course, why we don't say they died. When people die, they do not disappear, and we continue on. There's no such thing as out of sight, out of mind. There's no switch to flip and turn off our feelings. The person may not be lost, but we're at a loss for words, for normalcy, for what was and what could have been. And grief is such an unwielding thing. We're fine for 1 minute, years even. And then the deep sadness comes, seemingly out of nowhere. That's the thing about people who are loved. Their memories keep. They're never too far away. They come to us in a song lyric or a line of movie dialogue or on a long walk. What was that they always said? Oh, that's right. And they always said it in a certain way. So maybe we'll do it that way and laugh a little in memoriam. Be with us, Holy One, as we grieve over the empty places in our community, and we'll light a candle and ring a bell and say an extra prayer. And we trust with sure and certain hope that their lessons and legacies live on through us. Amen.
We take a moment to name those from our community who have died over the past year. We'll ring the bell and have a breath after each name. Walter Murrell, Betty Root, John Miller, Laureen Smith. We carry the lessons and legacies of those named, as well as a lot of other people in our lives. We might say that they have prepared a table for us, and they have placed the things on that table that they think will nourish us for the journey ahead. Not all of it is nourishing, but they thought that it would be, and they placed it there with all their generosity and hope for our well-being. And so I want to invite you into a spiritual practice this morning. I guess a little bit of a guided meditation. And I know that there are some of you who, when I say apple, you visualize a three-dimensional apple and you can see the light reflecting off of it, and everything in your head is like, that's what an apple looks like. And I know for some of you, when I say apple, you don't see anything in your mind at all. You know what the word is and you can describe it if you need to, but we don't all think about things the same way. And so I invite you to make of this practice whatever it needs to be for you, and I'll offer a few modifications as we go along, just in case you don't know exactly how to navigate it. But if you're able and willing, I invite you to imagine that table before you. I think for most of us, it's a pretty lavish spread our ancestors have provided. And by ancestors, maybe we can imagine the people who are not just blood relatives of us, but the people who have fed our lives and nurtured the lives of those who came before us. Maybe we think about spiritual ancestors. Maybe we think about the teachers of the teachers of the teachers who nourished us in some way. Ancestors can be a lot of things. But if you imagine that table, or if you imagine the things that those people might have provided, allow yourself to take in that bounty. Maybe initially foods come to mind because I said table, but there might be a lot of other things. What else have your ancestors brought and placed before you with the intention that it would nourish your journey? Maybe there are some things there you didn't ask for. Maybe there are some things on that table that you really cherish. Maybe some things that are really difficult for you to even look at on that table. So come back up from that. We'll go back to that table in just a second, but I wonder if you're willing to share, I wonder what you notice that your ancestors have placed on that table. Is there something that stands out to you that you want to speak into this space? What have your ancestors provided for you on that table? Oh, it's a sensitive thing. I get it.
Some are sitting on the table and giving me a hug.
Yeah, just the care from our ancestors is important.
Literature and language.
Literature and language, yeah. I don't have to actually repeat it when I give you the microphone. I'll have to remember that.
Well, there's a lot of love from a lot of people there, but I'll just lift up my mentor in school psychology, Louise Federici. As she was dying of cancer, she had her mother knit Afghans for those of us around her, and I still have that and treasure that.
Yeah.
A lot of joy, a lot of laughter, and great courage.
Great, you've got some amazing stuff on your table. My table has other things on it.
I just remember being at the makeshift kids' table off into the living room where the adult table was in the dining room, and how much fun we had as cousins being at the kids' table.
It's fun at the kids' table. Do you feel like you ever got to the adult table?
What's that?
Do you feel like you ever got to the adult table?
Not with my ancestors.
Not with your ancestors. Great.
Just a number of things that my grandfather taught me. Some that you've seen the results of, like woodworking. He helped me with that. And my grandmother also made these nice dinner rolls that were kind of tied into a little overhand knot. I still just seeing one of those takes me back still. It's just amazing how comforting just the sight of one of those is.
Yeah, nourishing lessons and nourishing food. I'll come to you in just a second, Judy.
My paternal grandmother, the smell of coffee and little, what she called samples. She'd get sweets from the bakery and cut them up so everybody could have a little piece.
What about you, Judy?
Right away, an old-fashioned beer stein on a table, pale taupe, pewter lid, my grandmother laughing, and the heritage of having humor as a major component of raising children and grandchildren.
Yeah, humor is important. I just want to name that my table has other stuff on it, and maybe yours does too, but we'll take one more, Lisa, and then I'll...
My grandmother was my whole world, and she passed when I was 11. But she crocheted all of the doilies and stuff that was at her table, and all of the placemats she sewed, and she taught me that skill.
That's great. Lots of crafts and food, in addition to things like humor and care. I just want to name that there are things that our ancestors left us. I'm going to put this back, Mike. I don't know what kind of noise it's going to make. Thank you. There are things that our ancestors provided, at least I'm aware of some things, that I'm not sure I want on the table. I mean, there are qualities like perfectionism, this hypervigilance that I have about how other people are seeing me, hyperproductivity, making sure I'm always, this Protestant work ethic is one way of saying it, but it's this busyness that almost doesn't have a purpose to it aside from just being busy, not being willing to rest in a way that I need that nourishes me, a defiance against things that I don't agree with. There are some things that my ancestors provided for me that they meant well, and they were really mindful of what I needed for survival. They didn't know me. I'm talking about way back. This comes back generations to us. There are some things that were intended to support our survival that are not necessarily the healthiest things to have on our table. And so, as I invite our musicians to provide a little bit of a meditative background for us, I invite you to go back to that table and just think about all of the things. Don't be afraid to look at some of the stuff you don't want on the table. Imagine everything there. And you can do that with gratitude. Even the things that I did not want, my ancestors offered to me out of love and care. I can be grateful and say no thank you. So as you look at that table, as you imagine all of the things that your ancestors placed on that table for you, see if you can look at them all with gratitude and choose those things that nourish you and set aside the things that do not. If you know of a specific ancestor or a specific thing that you really don't like having at your table, it's okay for you to say, I appreciate this, but this is not going to nourish me, and I'm just going to brush it aside. Now, some of us might need to throw it, and we're not going to judge. But you can also just set it aside and say, thank you so much. I won't be needing this. This is not nourishing to me. we do not have to fear the gifts of our ancestors, even the ones that come in ugly boxes. As you go through all of the things on your table, you can embrace those things that nourish you. And you can embrace your ancestors that gave you things that don't nourish you. And say, thank you so much for doing your best. And that can be hard. But it is also ours to do. As we sift through the things on our tables, we can still give prominence to all of those beautiful, nourishing, helpful, creative things that our ancestors provided for us. We don't have to focus on the negative or on the things that aren't healthy for us. Sometimes the same ancestors give us great joy and delight, and also some things that we need to set aside and say, thank you, but this doesn't belong on my table. And the ancestors who love us and care for us will understand. And if there are people who are closer to us in time, ancestors that we knew well, it may be that we need a little space before we tell them that their gift doesn't belong on our table. We may need to go further back. It's okay if your ancestors don't have names or faces. You can be grateful to them and choose what will nourish you. And as you go through the things on that table, there may be some things you're not sure about. You may need to set it aside and examine it later. And decide, is this something that I want to hold on to? Will this nourish me? Will this sustain me? And there may be things that you see on your table that you don't even recognize. You're not sure where it came from. You're not sure how it got there, who passed it on to you. And that's okay too. You get to decide what stays on your table. I invite you to take a breath, come back to this room, this space, just a reminder that you are safe here, and we will all do our best to continue to make it that way for one another. And in the days ahead, maybe you'll want to revisit that table and decide what to do with some of the things that your ancestors provided for you. For the moment, I'm going to invite us to gently rise, embody our spirit, and sing together. And thank you very much to our musicians for providing that space for us. We're going to sing All My Memories of Love. It is 3:36 in the gray hymnal. And then I'm going to give you part 2 of the sermon that I wasn't really expecting when we put this service together. There are some things that I want to let you know about, and I'll invite the choir to come up when I get to that part, because that was intended to be the end of the sermon, but I also need to lift up that we share a common table as a community, as a congregation. And beloveds, what we put on that common table matters. That's why we have a covenant, because collectively, this congregation has decided these are the things that would be nourishing to have on our table, and some other things would not be as nourishing. It was a unanimous vote at our annual meeting in June, this covenant that we speak when we light our chalice each Sunday. And this week, several of you have brought to my attention that someone in our community put something on our table that doesn't align with our covenant. An individual chose to misuse our member directory and mail an anonymous pamphlet to some of you. And even though that seems like a small thing, it is a violation. It's someone using the congregation without consent to get a personal need met. And I can only assume that the individual knew that this behavior wasn't in alignment with our covenant because they did it anonymously. That's kind of how that works. I know when we're really wrapped up in fear, it feels like a release valve to share that fear with other people. And sending alarmist propaganda in the mail probably feels emotionally exciting too. It's clandestine and subversive, and it ticks a lot of our human emotional boxes. But it's not a way to receive care from one another in this community when you're really scared about change. To be specific, this behavior doesn't cultivate trust, doesn't honor boundaries or celebrate differences. It doesn't invite open, curious conversation. It's a one-sided attempt to persuade people to agree with an anxious perspective. It doesn't create safe and brave space for healthy conflict and creativity, though it might have felt fun in the moment to do. So what do we do when someone in our community puts something on our table that doesn't belong there? We can start by being grateful, just as we are with our ancestors. Thank you for being willing to bring this fear or this anxiety or whatever it is to our common table. This doesn't really seem like it's going to be nourishing to us, so I'm going to set it over here. But come sit down next to me and tell me what's got you so wrapped up. We can listen with compassion and understanding without needing to agree or convince somebody of anything. We can just say, yeah, that seems really scary. We can offer compassion and care and invite people back into a covenantal relationship without agreeing with their opinions or offering our own. They may not be ready to hear any other perspective if they're wrapped up in fear. Now, we can't do that with anonymous whispers, but we can continue to demonstrate that in places where people can know it's safe to express their fears, that this is a congregation that forms a trustworthy container for that, and that we don't have to agree with you to show you compassion. What do we do when our own fear or anxiety is what we want to flop on our community's table? Well, I think the first thing is that we work on accepting that we can be deeply heard and understood without people agreeing with everything that we think and feel. I know a lot of us want external validation. We feel safer when people cluster together and nod in unison. But our congregational covenant and our larger Unitarian Universalist aspirations call us to grow into a more centered way of being. We might call it self-differentiation. And our personal spiritual practices can help with that. But as I've said many times, we're holding listening circles every month this year so that people have a safe and compassionate place to share any fears or excitement or other thoughts and feelings that may come up, and to listen deeply to the thoughts and feelings of others in our community. We do this so that we can openly name and own what we're feeling, and so we can recognize that we don't all share identical experiences. We're a community of individuals who share common values, but we are not common in our experience of things. So please register for our November listening circles. And if you can't do that, they'll hopefully be happening every month from now through May, so you'll have an opportunity. I'll invite the choir to come up now, because before our first November listening circle, there are a couple of other events that I want to let you know about. One is that tonight, our Earth-Centered Spirituality group is hosting a Samhain celebration at 6 p.m. in the Fellowship Hall. Samhain is a feast of the ancestors, a little bit more visceral than what we imagined here. It's also the new year in the Celtic tradition, so we'll honor our ancestors and spend time contemplating what we want to leave behind with the turning of the wheel into the new year. So please bring a picture or representation of a dearly departed person or pet for the ancestor altar tonight at 6 p.m. in the fellowship hall. I want to also let you know that next week's forum about making your home more comfortable, eco-friendly, and affordable is one small piece of a larger interfaith Through the Roof partnership, an initiative focused on congregational energy efficiency. So the forum is going to be next Sunday at 9 a.m. in person and on Zoom, and there will be additional events happening that you can find out about in the newsletter. There's also a display in the fellowship hall. It's a little house that says Through the Roof. You can't miss it. So if you want more information, you can look at that. Our auction is Saturday, November 4th, like the very next Saturday that comes across your calendar. And our golden ticket raffle winner for that is going to get a dinner cruise on the Lady Caroline, formerly known as the Nautica Queen. I don't know what that means, but it sounds really exciting for a raffle if you want to be there. If you want to continue the conversation from today's service and how it touches you personally, we'll have our Soul Matters conversation in the library. And just in case you get there early and want to join in the conversation right away, there are discussion prompts on the table that you can use, and we'll have a facilitator in there at some point this morning. But some people like to get started early, so I'll just let you know those prompts are there. Lots of other stuff in the newsletter. Please check it out to know all the things that are happening here. And now we can extinguish our chalice.
As our service comes to an end, let us share the words on the yellow pew card. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.